This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dancero and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Welcome to episode 48 of the No Stroke Podcast. I'm David Dancero. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Garrow. How are you, Mike?
We're good. Yeah, we're rolling. We're on a back-to-back Survivor Story episode. Really great chat. Thanks to Doug Neely, who's partnered up with Pam Duncan with Care Directions and kind of trying to implement this Compass CP program for transition to care. As we'll let Tim speak to, and when we get into it, there's a, and we speak to, that's really what we cover is what, Tim was able to create with F3 Nation. But yeah, I know Tim and Doug were friendly, got connected through this program. And Doug reached out to me and said, hey, friend of mine just had a stroke a couple months back. You really need to chat with him. And, we're so fortunate for that connection, to be able to speak with Tim today. I think this episode really opened our eyes to something we all like. It's a systematic issue here in the States, but globally. And, there's been some attention around it recently with John Fetterman trying to, post-stroke now, for a few months, and recently checked himself in for mental health consultation at the VA. And, we saw a lot of posts come out, right? I think the New York Times wrote an article, Washington Post, there was a bit of publicity around, mental health struggles for stroke survivors. As we allude to, it's not just that survivor, but the caregiver who also has this. And it's kind of what they often term it, like the hidden disease or the hidden disability. Obviously, sure. I remember walking around in grocery stores and, everybody would be staring at my mom when I was a young kid. And I'd be like, what the, it's the visible, thing for stroke survivors if you have that, foot drop or arm spasticity, right? But there's a lot more that goes into it that, you can't see. And it's all up here.
You're right on, Mike. And, this one hit home for me. Tim, our guest, kind of pulled a few things out of me and got me sharing a little bit more that you probably heard for the first time too. And it is an important episode because as we get into that in the second half of the interview, we start the interview with what occurred during his stroke and the foundation of his organization F3. With fitness being the first, if the first F of that three parts that, is the best medicine for a stroke survivor. And we talked that, and we've talked on other episodes about that mindset and the ability and having the right dose and not maybe giving the survivor the opportunity to live up to their potential because we short them on that biggest bit of medicine that they need for optimizing long-term outcomes. So it was, one thing I didn't get to ask you that I don't know if you, because it resonated for me. And when we get into this about the other F about the fellowship in the community, and he talks about the brotherhood and, does much, not my role here isn't to explain, but to just ask you if some of that resonated. I shared my why wanting to get back to my guys and playing hockey after my stroke and just that companionship. I would ask you, do you miss any of that, Mike? Was that resonating with you since you stopped playing ball at a high level? Was that something you got you thinking a little bit?
Yeah, like at the time, now that you ask it, absolutely, right? I was training 3 nights a week with my team, and then we'd play every single weekend. For 8 months a year. And you create that brotherhood, that accountability that Tim speaks to. But yeah, I my mind has just been, even so before, we recorded this interview, I had an initial chat with Tim, and he was talking me through, what we'll cover with F3, and just, that aspect of community is so important, really, and to answer your question, yes, I do miss it. It was a huge part of my life, something that I had since, I started playing as a young child all the way, and I was fortunate to do that until I was 30 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a thing that drops, but not to sound corny, but I mean, meeting Megan and kind of having that aspect of a strong relationship, like I think that's the key aspect, right? It doesn't matter if it's 10 people or one person. It's that support system, it's the accountability, and kind of the encouragement that gets you out of bed in the morning and keeps you going.
Yeah, get you through the highs and lows of life. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of our longer episodes, so I don't think we, let's kind of get into this one. But
Okay.
just before we do get going, last week, I mentioned that we're up for a nomination through the American Stroke Association, we've fallen under the Voters' Choice Award. So by the time this episode gets out, voting's going to be live. So, we're going to have a link up on our website. So if you go to nostrokepod.com, you could find a link to the voting website on American Stroke Association. But you could also, just check our social feed. We'll have some links there, as well as just Googling Stroke Hero Award 2023. Through the American Stroke Association, you could find out how to, cast your vote. And, we would really appreciate it. It's kind of my name, but again, we've been fortunate, David, to work together, and, what we've created is, between us, like it's you and I, same thing, that accountability, right? It's not easy to do these podcasts.
Yeah, you're right.
It takes a lot of our time. And I think if it was not a team, it wasn't you and I kind of doing this in partnership, it probably wouldn't be what it is today.
Yeah.
So, thank you. And
right back at you. And, for our audience, please help us with a full court press on this, right? You stole a little basketball term there, Mike. See that?
Share it with the friends, far and wide, family, everybody.
Sure.
But it'd be nice recognition. So yeah, let's get into this one again. Shout out to Doug Neely and the crew down at Care Directions for making this introduction. So Tim Whitmire, we'll let him kind of dive into his full background. He's a Harvard grad, used to row, competitively, in his early 20s. You guys kind of go back and forth. He had a marathon career. I think he's ran something like 37 marathons.
I sensed a challenge in there towards the end, so we'll see about that. But yeah.
And now he's, he had a journalist career, kind of shifted more, and now he's doing some business consulting for team building, right, within organizations and trying to get cultures together. So he's a very, smart guy that's had an unfortunate event happen through complications of surgery, and suffered a stroke. But it was remarkable to hear the story of what he created with F3. And I think as you listen to this episode, just keep in mind like how important community is for you, whether you're a stroke survivor, caregiver, and if you're a therapist or a healthcare executive, whoever listening to this, understand that support, these support systems are out there, right? And it's the people with lived experience like us who can really come together. And I keep kind of harping on this point, but we need to be one voice. And I think by engaging with stroke survivors and caregivers, you'll see how important, like, there's the hidden aspects which we cover here around mental health. There's so many aspects of this that right now are siloed, and people are passionate. Obviously our past guests, Raylene and her son Kyler, on the pediatric side with AVM, but to make change, which we all know needs to happen, we need to come together. And I think what Tim will speak about with this model of F3 and kind of the core aspects of what that model is, something special could be made for the stroke community around that. So it was an eye-opening episode. And I think, to your point, thank you you mentioned it at the start, like, it's probably the first time you've talked about, your mental health struggles, when you were, an early survivor. And, we hope this episode will, resonate with someone, one listener, right, that could kind of take that away and have a conversation, whether that's with a loved one, your therapist, your neurologist, or us, right?
Well said, Mike.
Well, let's get into this one. Again, Tim Whitmire, stroke survivor, and what's his name? OBT.
OBT. You'll learn about the OBT. Enjoy.
Hi, Tim, and welcome to the No Stroke Podcast.
Awesome to be here, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to be chatting with you today. But we were connected through Doug Neely, who is CEO of Care Directions, working with Pam Duncan down in Carolina, which you're based. So we'll let you kind of chat through your background. But when Doug connected us, he said, "Hey, there's this good friend of mine. We connected through 5 a.m. men's club that we do every morning down in the trenches, and working out every morning. But he had a recent stroke, but I think he's a guy that you really want to chat with. And we first connected about a month ago, Tim, and you're able to share your story with me and kind of what you have been able, prior to your stroke, the successes and everything that you have, and kind of your mentality now with life after stroke. I was buzzing after our first chat, so I'm sure this is going to be an exciting one here. But for our listeners here, why don't you kind of bring us on that journey? Kind of bit of your youth, growing up, and what kind of led up and to your stroke.
Sure. So I'm 52 years old now, and I was born in California. I was born in Southern California, in Pasadena, and at the time of my birth in 1970. I was about 6 weeks premature, so which in those days was extremely premature. So spent some time in the ICU as an infant, needed a blood transfusion, and there were issues, kind of from the beginning. I've had a heart murmur since I was a child, and so that was something that eventually played into my stroke. But grew up in California. Went to college at Harvard, graduated from there in 1992, and then embarked on a career in journalism that led me first to David's home state of Rhode Island. I was with the Associated Press in Providence for 2 years in the 90s. Went to New York City, worked on the New York City desk there, where I met and married my wife, and then went down to Lexington, Kentucky, and was the one-man correspondent in Lexington, which is mainly it's 10% news and 90% UK Wildcats basketball and horse racing. So and then from there made the transition to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I've now lived for 23 years, and took a job with the Charlotte Observer, which was it was and is the daily newspaper in Charlotte. Went back to work at the Associated Press as the head of their bureau a couple of years later. Decided I liked it better working for the wire service, and then transitioned out of journalism in 2006. And I was working in investment banking in Charlotte. We have a number of kind of middle market, sell side investment banks that specialize in kind of buying and selling mid-sized companies. And I was working in business development for one of those banks and had helped found another one of them in 2011, which is when a close friend of mine and I launched a movement that's now known as F3 Nation. And that's, as you alluded to, that's guys meeting at 5 and 5:30 a.m. in parking lots and public parks and school campuses and that sort of thing, to work out and to kind of get in what we would jokingly call a down payment on the day. That was just kind of what worked for my friend Dave Redding and myself. We had met at a similar format workout that was being done at a public park here in Charlotte by another group of guys. Dave and I met at that workout in probably 2009, I think. And that was a Saturday morning only workout. And it was kind of 7 to 8 a.m. The guys would get together. They would do a workout there in the park, use just kind of the things that were in the park, the jungle gym, a hill, do some push-ups in parking lot stalls, that kind of thing. And a different guy kind of led every week. And this was something that the guy who had founded it, Jeff Gillibo, had grown from himself and one of his fraternity brothers from UNC Chapel Hill over the course of about 5 years into a group of, about 20 to 25 regulars. And Dave and I were two of those regulars. We met out on the campus, which was the name of the workout. And when Jeff decided that he didn't want to grow that workout any further, when it got to about those 25 guys, and he felt like he was maybe losing a little bit of touch and a little of the connectivity with that group, and he shut it down to newcomers, that was when Dave and I looked at each other and said, this is crazy. This is doing too much good in our lives. We got to get it out and got to get it in front of more guys. So we launched what was originally intended as a spinoff of that workout on New Year's Day 2011 at a middle school campus here in Charlotte, and thought we'd kind of get 2 or 3 guys and sort of build it from there and see, maybe by the end of the first year we'd have as many guys as the campus did. And we had 35 on the first day, and those guys immediately asked us, hey, can we do this during the week? And we were like, no reason you can't. And so within kind of 3 to 4 months, we were dealing with the same problems that Jeff had dealt with, which is how you grow a movement, how you spin leaders out and plant different sites, and how you meet the demand for things. We sort of thought, well, maybe this is a New Year's resolution thing. I think all of us have probably experienced going in the gym the first week of January versus what it looks like, maybe the first week of March when we're recording right now, and how crowded the locker room is then, and versus 8 weeks later. But the snowball just kind of kept rolling, and we ended up sort of having to grow this movement really by the skin of our teeth, and we weren't making any money off of it. And we decided very early on this was not something to be franchised or anything like that, because the idea was to be able to offer the workouts free of charge and have them be peer led and really kind of grow it that way. So we got creative in some ways, and that really became kind of the story of my life for the next 8 years, was trying to figure out how to ride this movement, how to promote its growth, and how to balance my life at the same time, and make a living and so forth. So,
well, you did a hell of a job with it, right? I mean, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I mean, you have thousands of these groups now across the country, and I'm really I want to spend some time, further into this conversation unpacking what that community aspect and peer-led support did for you, during your recovery, and kind of that model that, is so important for others to get, with life after stroke, whether you're a survivor or a caregiver, right? It's getting that community together. So yeah, fascinating. And thank you for kind of walking us through, your story, how how this came together with F3 Nation. But let's kind of backtrack, so you've got to this point, right? You spent these 8 years, being able to build up, this amazing community, and really doing it, because you saw the good that was coming from it, right?
Yeah.
And, we could speak to, the lack of funding for these types of things, and similar to stroke as well,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, let's kind of just touch on, your stroke incident. Like, what happened? Like, what was the cause of your stroke?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a long history of vasospasm, going back 20 years. I'd had a TIA in the year 2000, that I recovered from very quickly, kind of was in the hospital, but everything was sort of fine and normal again by the evening time, several hours after it happened. I went in for planned heart surgery last November after my primary care physician, she was listening to my heart at my regular checkup last spring, and she's like, "Oh, your heart murmur sounds different. We should get that checked out." I'm like, "Okay, I didn't know you could detect that." Just, I always figure they stick the stethoscope on your chest and it's sort of for show or whatever, but no, she really she heard something different. So went and got an echocardiogram, and it turned out I had a leaflet on the mitral valve in the left chamber of my heart. Was with the cord was broken on the leaflet, and I was suffering from severe mitral regurgitation. So we met with the cardiac surgeon, and he told me to kind of amp back my workouts. I wasn't feeling any effects from it, which was kind of crazy. They kept asking me, you feel more tired? Is it, harder for you these days? I'm like, no, I feel fine. But we planned the surgery for November 9th, and sort of went under that morning, was at the hospital, and next thing I knew, I was waking up in the recovery room, and all these people are yelling at me and telling me they need to rush me to the MRI, and can you feel this? Can you feel that? Sort of thing. And I remember being in the MRI machine and kind of going through that, and then the next thing I know, it's kind of 2 days later, and I basically have no movement in my upper extremities, and cognitively I'm fine. I have some vision issues, but it's been kind of the road back from there of sort of recovery and regain of function, and primarily on my right side. The left side has been a lot slower to come back, but I'd suffered what they call a watershed infarct, which was, at some point during the surgery or in the recovery room afterward, I suffered, catastrophic drop in blood pressure, restriction of blood flow to my brain. And that's why I have the impacts on both sides of my body, because you think about, the brain as a watershed, and the blood trying to flow down to all parts of the watershed. If you restrict that blood flow, you're going to get a lack of blood flow to parts of the brain, throughout both hemispheres of the brain. So you end up with impacts on both sides of the body. So I was in the hospital in suburban Charlotte for about 10 days, in the ICU for 5 days, and then in the regular hospital for 5 days, and then transferred on November 18th to Atrium Medical Systems main campus in Charlotte. And they have a very well-regarded stroke rehab hospital there. And so got to spend 2.5 weeks there and really benefit from coordinated care in terms of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. So that was, and we can talk more about what the F3 role in that was, and can certainly share that with you. But I'm back home now. I've been back home since December 6th. We're in my office right now, or I'm in my office right now, and working full time at my job. I have a strategic advisory practice where I work as a coach to CEOs as well as management teams on kind of alignment of effort and goal setting and execution against those goals. So back to that, I've been cleared to drive again as of last Wednesday. So we're working on getting set for that, and I'm working out again. So.
And how hard was it to kind of pace yourself coming back? Because before we started this interview, you come from an athletic background. We were talking about your marathon training. Did the rehab team have to kind of put the reins back on you, or were you telling them what you could do?
They did. We were at one point, PT didn't, they kind of didn't know what to do with me because I've done a lot of rucking, which is basically hiking in a backpack with 30 pounds, and it's something we do in F3 a lot. And at one point they had me hauling a 25-pound weight plate around the halls of the hospital, and they were trying to get my heart rate up, and then trying to make me, have a bag over my shoulder, and I'm putting my hand in, I'm trying to feel objects and pull them out without looking at them. And they're just trying to do anything they can to tire me out. And I'm like, can we just put the weight plate in a backpack and I can just go like that? So that part, once I was an outpatient, PT hasn't had much to do with me. And everybody, all my care team and therapists tell me that, I benefited tremendously from being in very good shape coming into this. And that's, substantially has increased the pace of my recovery as well. So that, yeah, they've had to put some reins on me. I'll tell you all a story later about my cardiologist putting some reins on me that made me a little unhappy. We'll save that for a little bit later.
Nice. So, we've talked about, this model of F3 that you and your co-founder created, really grew this as a national brand, thousands of men joining this community. But we haven't defined, F3, what that means, right? Sure. So, I think and I'm happy to kind of share, right? So F3 Nation, right? It's 3 Fs, right? So we've covered one, I think, right? The fitness element. Yeah. And the two others, one is fellowship and faith, right? So let's talk about the aspect of fellowship, right? From the model that obviously you saw as something that really inspired and helped other men, with this community setting, but, in your experience with life after stroke as well, right? Yeah. Let's talk. Yeah. So if you want to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, so we, in F3 lingo, the fellowship is the second F, right? Fitness is the first F. Fellowship is second F, faith is the third F. And we found in our experience that it really kind of proceeded sequentially, right? So the free workout, the fitness was kind of the magnet. It was really easy for guys to invite their friend to a free workout, right? Like, so, and this was what we experienced in when we were even in the predecessor workout, when we were working out there. Both Dave and I got in really good shape from working out on Saturdays with these guys, and there was sort of this infectious thing where you wanted to keep up with the group, so you started working out more on weekdays, and then maybe you started to pay more attention to what you were eating and that sort of thing. So I lost probably 30-40 pounds over the course of 2008, 2009. And I was going around town, and I was in a business development role at that point. So I was frequently doing kind of the cocktail party circuit and, networking and all that sort of stuff. And guys would be like, what are you doing? P90X? Are you doing, did you join a gym or whatever? I was like, no, I just, work out on Saturdays at Freedom Park. You should come, because it's a really easy invitation to extend. And that, so that we call that the magnet. And then the glue is the second F. And that's just a reflection of the fact that once you've been in this for a little while, once, maybe that initial high of like, oh, I lost, 15 pounds, I lost 20 pounds, I'm in the best shape, I've been in since I was in college or whatever. The thing that you find out is like that alarm's going off at 4:45 in the morning, and you're not rolling over and hitting the snooze button, not because you're dying to do burpees in the mud at 5:30, but because you want to get out and see your other guys. And that the camaraderie that comes from those workouts, and the shared experience of doing something hard early in the day, and kind of suffering together, that builds bonds. And the U.S. Army knows this. My oldest son is in basic training right now because he's going to officer candidate school. And it's, that sports teams know this, all of that. So we were simply tapping into and almost reverse engineering this process by which we were solving a problem of male loneliness with fitness. And that was really the revelation to us, was that I don't think neither Dave nor I realized how lonely we were in our lives. We just thought we were normal dudes living normal lives. But all of a sudden you have all these friends everywhere from the workout, and you're building these connections, and your life is so much richer as a result of that. And then the third F is just the logical extension of that, right? So you make a guy fit, and you make him friended in a strong way for the first time in his adult life. And now he's got all this energy. And we always defined faith as simply a belief in something outside yourself. We've never done it, kind of denominationally, or, in terms of any specific religion. We've just left it as kind of that definition. And the third F becomes the dynamite in the equation. You got your magnet, you got your glue, and then you got your dynamite, which is guys wanting to go out and change the world and make it better, because they've got all this energy all of a sudden. And so that's where you get guys, planting workouts at drug rehab centers, planning workouts at homeless shelters, planning workouts in low income parts of town that might not normally have heard of F3. So you got guys organizing mission trips and just with a tremendous amount of energy to tackle life in a way that they did not have previously. So
yeah, there's those three component, right? And I like the way you kind of talked to the glue and kind of the state, right? It's, that glue that you mentioned with fellowship, what was that like? I can imagine like the camaraderie and that brotherhood that you're creating, right? I've played sports. I think the three of us here, we've all been involved in athletics, and, it's the same thing in any team dynamic, right? You have that accountability. And for post-stroke rehab and life after stroke, you need, like, that is what you need, right? And it's such an important aspect. And I'd like for you to kind of describe, what was that fellowship aspect experience when you had this stroke and you were going through that outpatient experience?
Yeah, so the first piece of that was, and my wife, and I'll use a Southernism here, bless her heart, she did not want to sort of hit the red button and have the F3 Nation care team activate, because she kind of seen it before. And she really did not want the memorial vigil in the hospital courtyard with the shovel flags. That's one of the things we do, is it's an American flag on a shovel that we plant at the workout site every time. She did not want the vigil and the candlelight vigil and the shovel flag workout in the hospital courtyard, because she knew that's what the F3 guys would do if properly activated. But my brother came in about 5 days after I had my stroke, and he realized that I really needed to that we need to kind of get the word out and do it in a kind of discreet way that would sort of respect my privacy and my family's privacy, but that there were, that I had all these relationships from F3 that I needed to activate. And so he, with his help, that first Monday when he showed up, I sent a text message to two of my best friends within F3, a couple guys who both also grew up in the Bay Area. And with their help, he really organized just a group of guys who I have close relationships with within F3 here in Charlotte. That, guys that I've been on trips with, guys that I've run distance relay races with, guys who I trust a lot, who were able to kind of get organized and start visiting me in the hospital. And then crucially, once I was transferred to the rehab hospital and was doing, kind of 4 to 5 hours a day of PT, OT, and speech therapy, literally every single PT workout that I had in the rehab hospital, I had another F3 guy there to do it with me and to keep me company in that. And my wife I have an F3 flag that somebody made for me at some point. She hung that in my room at the rehab hospital. And so all the nurses would come in and be like, "What's that?" And so I'd have to explain it to them. But it got to the point where the therapists and the nurses in the hospital were like, "How many friends do you have?" I was just like, well, it's the F3 guys, so that was really critical in the recovery, and to have guys with me there kind of every step of the way, and not, the quote unquote workouts that I was doing, sort of paled in comparison to what a normal F3 workout would do, but just to have them there was really just, kind of critical in that recovery.
Yeah, I didn't want to jump in, but as you were describing that, I was kind of reliving and not to add another F to it, but that essentially gave you the foundation to build back up on. And,
yeah,
over the years, how many people I've talked to that are new survivors that have said, I just feel lost. I feel lost after my stroke, because it's scary for you and the family and your immediate, close relatives who know what you're going through. But for others, they don't know how, and close friends sometimes are not as close, or they don't feel comfortable. You learn who your true friends are. And for me, the biggest thing I wanted to do is get back to late night hockey to play with my guys for the same reason, that camaraderie, and that was lost. I couldn't do it for years. I couldn't do it. And, that as the journey continued, I was able to get back on skates, but to have that group and to have everyone at every turn for you is it just, you were getting back some of everything that you gave over the years too. I don't know. I'm sure you're not looking at it like that now, but
no,
everyone stepped up.
I've said to the guys that, it's a dark irony, but I spent a lot of time building this thing, but without any realization that I was building the ark that was going to, carry me to safety when the storm hit, and it's absolutely true. And I'll give you guys, this is a bit of it's commonly told either as a parable or a joke, but it, basically goes, storms headed for a big city, call it a Category 5 hurricane. And there's the guy in the city and everybody's evacuating and got to leave town. And this guy's like, you know what? I've been a man of faith my entire life. I'm going to stay put. God's going to save me when this storm hits. And sure enough, the storm hits, and everybody else leaves. This guy's in his house. Waters rise, and now he's on the second floor of the house, and a boat comes floating by, and some people who are pulling stragglers out of houses, and they're like, "Come on, get in the boat. We'll save you." And the guy's like, "Nope. I'm a man of faith. God's going to save me." And now the waters rise some more, and he's up on the third floor of the house, and another boat goes by, and they're trying to rescue him. "Nope, I'm good. Waters rise some more. He's on the roof of the house. Now here comes a National Guard helicopter, and they're offering to drop a line down to him. No, I'm good. God's going to save me. And the waters rise some more, and he drowns. And now he's at the pearly gates, and he's meeting St. Peter, and he says, I'd like to speak to your manager. There's something wrong here. And so he gets his audience before God, and he's like, "God, I served you all my life. I was a man of extreme faith. You didn't come to me in my hour of need." And God said, "What are you talking about? I sent 2 boats and a helicopter." and that was F3 for me, literally. I mean, I would lie awake in the hospital, and I would have this sort of, magical thinking of like, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be able to use my left arm again. Like everything's going to be back to the way it was, or somehow time's going to reset, and I'm going to be back on November 8th, and everything, my life is going to be like it was before. And it's, David, it is that feeling of like, you're in a body that you don't know and understand, and it feels completely foreign. And that was magical thinking. That was belief in miracles, and or wishing for miracles, when the realization is the real miracle is these people that have ridden to my rescue, and that are here, now to save me. And it's all about it was all about the relationships at that point. It was all about the second F, and that played into the third F of realizing, the ultimate faith is what you build between yourself and others. So,
yeah, well said.
Thank you.
All right, let's let's take a quick break and we'll be back and cover it. We want to kind of dive into some of the upcoming things that you have on your plate here soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, and we're still here with Tim. We first half of this, we had a great chat around, obviously, your background, what's, the model that you've built here with F3, highlighted kind of what that model has done for you, as part of your recovery. But I want to transition to a topic that's, often not spoke about, with life after stroke, often tucked under the rug, especially in men, and something that recently got a bit of publicity with John Fetterman, a congressman from Pennsylvania, who, admitted himself into the hospital, a few months now after stroke. So I suppose what I'd like to ask is, like, how important do you think it is for stroke survivors to be open with struggles about mental health and seeking out community support, right, during this recovery process? And, with your experience with F3, how could these community-based programs really help address some of these mental health challenges?
Yeah, I will say, I'm personally on antidepressants right now, and have been since a very short time after my stroke. I was, in the weeks immediately afterward, I was hugely anxious about, wasn't sleeping well, didn't understand what this was going to do for my life, how this was going to play out. Was I going to be able to lead a normal life again? Was I going to have, assistive aid all the time, or home health or anything like that? And so that, for me, really kind of the antidepressants really, kind of leveled things out and helped me sort of take things really kind of one day at a time. And then, to your point, and this is where the F3 thing was also very helpful, because that's been a very clear stream of effort within F3, is to break down some of those barriers around men's mental health and get guys to open up and to talk about, when they're feeling sad, why they're feeling sad, what the anxiety is about. And so there was a whole kind of F3 mental battle kind of group that is addressing that. And we've had guys, very prominent leaders within F3, who have been very open about their struggles with depression. And it's, it is a society-wide problem that F3 is not going to solve on its own. And certainly we can talk about all the reasons for, mental health issues among the younger generation. But, our sort of piece of the problem is, let's break down, what this is like for adult men who are, in most other things, pretty high functioning in their lives, high functioning enough to get up, early in the morning and get themselves to a physically difficult workout. Those guys are thought of as pretty high achieving in society, yet a lot of them are carrying very heavy burdens around in terms of mental health. And I think the same thing, very much holds true for stroke survivors. So David, I don't know what your experience was. Yeah, I'd have to imagine you went through some dark days afterward as well.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, because I know it's not easy to bring that up and admit that it's not, you're not okay at the time. I would fake it until I tried to make it. And I would, there were times when I would close my eyes at night to let my wife think that I was sleeping, so that I could know that she was getting some rest and recovery, because she was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for managing the kids. But I didn't, and this is the one big piece of advice I give to anyone I help today, is don't put that in a closet somewhere. Like, you got to address that early. I didn't really address it for probably 4 or 5 years. And it kind of came to a head in a couple of different ways. And finally I said, my Zen was when I could return to running and getting back to the exercise, but talking through it with people had really, that needed to happen. And so, it's real, and it's really still because you're, as a male stroke survivor, you're thinking about everything but that. I got to get back to being productive. I got to get back to being a provider. I got to get back to being a dad. You don't talk about the fact that there's true PTSD there. You're truly, and some of the things that we talked about on earlier episodes only came to light through talking to other folks on the podcast as well about, fears that are real that, I talked to them for the first time, sometimes, 15 years into my stroke that I've shared here, live, because it, when someone echoes that back and you're living it and you're hearing it and it makes it real and you're like, if it can help someone else, you bring it up. Absolutely.
Well,
So thank you.
I mean, it's fundamentally a brain injury, right? And then we're talking about mental illness here. I talked earlier about being kind of a stranger in my own body, and you're a stranger in your own brain to some extent as well. So it's such a natural output of the injury that it's just gotta. For men, it's something that we've got to do a better job of addressing. And I had the great good fortune to have an infrastructure around me that could, where I didn't have to edit what I was saying for anyone. I didn't have to put up a brave face, much as I in some cases wanted to, but getting more men into situations where they can be vulnerable and where they can enunciate those fears is just absolutely critical. So
well, thank you both for being open about that, and the same goes on the caregiver side. Obviously not the same things that are being worried. There's a reason why, David, your wife is sitting there and worried about every waking second, right? That causes so much stress on a caregiver as well. So it's really an important issue that we hope by having these conversations and being open and blunt, it allows others to feel the freedom to come out, and it takes time. It's not something easy to speak about, but there's support out there. That's why we were at recently the International Stroke Conference, and we met with some of the leading neurologists that are focused on young stroke in young adults. So one group out of Tufts, which David, that was your care team. Lester Young and Caitlin Skeels. They've built a great foundation, and there's many more centers across the nation now who are trying to again build these programs. But what's interesting is there's a key aspect that's missing in that care pathway, right? So when you were talking about your discharge and kind of outpatient experience, it's rare to find a social worker, a behavioral health expert kind of in that equation, right? And I mean some centers might, but I think that's a role within stroke rehab that really needs to get brought to life and more focus on, as the entire journey, right? Because it's you could regain some strength and gait in your arm and your legs and kind of be stronger foundationally, but you need like the brains, the muscle as well, right? Like how do you retrain that along with it? So I think I'm happy we were able to cover that. I think, David, really this is the first time we've kind of been open around that, and I know it's it's topic conversation. So Tim, thank you for being blunt and sharing that. I know, David, you had a question for Tim though.
Oh yeah. We're gonna get to the magic wand, but in doing a little research for the show, I noticed there's a lot of AKAs. I need to know you go by you're Tim, but you also go by the OBT. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, so everybody who goes to who posts to an F3 workout gets a nickname, and this is something we do at the end of the workout. We do something we call circle of trust, and you gather in a circle at the end of the workout, and you get a count of how many guys are there, And then you go around the circle and you say your hospital name, which is the name you were given in the hospital when you were born. And then you say your age, because we want to kind of know where you are in life's journey. And there's various razzing of people or praise of them. Once you get to 50, you get respect. And if you get to 60, that's double respect and so forth. So, and then you say your F3 name, which is your F3 nickname, and you get it at your first workout. And it's the responsibility of the group and really to the person who's led the workout to nickname you. And so we do this, we go around the circle, we get a count, we do the name-orama, and then we have announcements. And then there's the last part of it is there's usually some sort of shout out, which is often a prayer. In this part of the country, it's usually a Christian prayer, but in other parts of the country, it might just be kind of words of wisdom or whatever. And I'll send you guys a link to a video of me doing kind of the shout out at the first workout I went to after I got out of the hospital. And I'll repeat some of my material from earlier, but that'll give you a feel for it. But the nickname is really a critical part of it, because there's, we do a lot of tribal stuff in F3. There's a lot of lingo. There's a lot of acronyms, that you got to be an insider to understand. So, but OBT, I usually tell people, David and Mike, that you need to buy me a beer before I'll tell you the story of why I'm nicknamed OBT. But the reality is I was, when I first went to the predecessor workout at Freedom Park in 2008, this is when Obama was running for president the first time. And these guys were all very conservative. And I was driving a hybrid car, and I had an Obama sticker on my car. And they thought it was hilarious that I was gonna vote for Obama. So the OBT is basically Obama Tim. And so it's no more complicated than that. I've since adopted myself. I'm Nick, because I co-founded the thing. I get to bestow my own nickname, but some of the guys also call me the Bhagwan, because that's the cult leader from Oregon back in the 1980s and 1990s, who ended up going on trial in Charlotte for some reason. But one of the guys at the workout here in Charlotte started calling me the Bhagwan because I'm the cult leader of the group. I started this crazy men's workout cult. So I answer to OBT or Bhagwan or Tim. So,
well, thanks for sharing it, and we both owe you a beer.
Yeah, the funny thing is, all those guys were like, "Oh, Obama Tim, funny," and then of course many of them came up to me after the election and were like, "Well, actually, I voted for him too." All right, guys.
All right, OBT. Can we? You're the co-founder, so you could do what you want here. But I'm going to ask. Who Doug obviously connected us. Can we get we don't need the story. What's Doug's nickname?
Oh God. Scrubs. They call him Scrubs because he's working in he's been a career kind of medical guy. So I think that was the origin of that. I'm not sure I remember when. I mean, I've known Doug for years because he was involved very early on, and he and I have we've done some trips together. We've done some racing events together. So he was one of the first people who came and visited me in the rehab hospital, and he's like, you're not going to need this because you're getting great care here, but here's this thing that I'm working on with Pam, and here's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to extend the kind of care you're getting here to the whole survivor community. So that's something, not to turn this into an advertisement for what he or Pam are doing, but that's that's essential. So.
I mean, we could turn it into if Doug's willing to open the bank, and give us some advertising dollars, more than welcome.
Yes.
But no, I totally agree. You know what? We're very fortunate to connect with Pam Duncan and Doug with what they're building with Care Direction. So if you're just tuning into this one and haven't, you're saying what the hell we're talking about, go check the episode with Pam Duncan, world-renowned stroke expert, who are, they're really trying to focus on that transition of care that many folks speak of when they leave the hospital. You're falling off a cliff, right? So
yeah,
yeah, really important stuff that they're building. And you know, we end each episode here, Tim, with our infamous magic wand question. So, you know, I'd like to kind of hand you this magic wand, and given your, you know, experience, you know, pre-stroke, post-stroke, and everything you've done to kind of get to where you are today, and the impact that you've had on people's lives, you know, to take that magic wand and, you know, empower yourself to redesign what a stroke care pathway could look like for future stroke survivors.
Yeah, so you know, I've thought about this a lot, and it really is for everyone to be able to have the coordinated care experience that I had in the rehab hospital at Atrium, because that really, and I you know, teased my wife earlier. I know I'm going to hear it from her when she hears that I said bless her heart earlier on this podcast, but I mean, she heard about the rehab hospital, and then she was on, you know, she was my fiercest advocate for, we need to get him there. This is the thing that he needs to do to get him back to as close to full function as we can get him. And she was on the case with the insurers and the hospital folks to get me a slot there. And while I had that 2.5 weeks in the hospital, it was, you know, it was like boot camp. It was 4 to 5 hours a day of therapy, but it was an integrated care approach where I had, you know, a single doctor who was sort of overseeing all the therapy and that stuff, but all the different people that I was seeing, and you reference, you know, there's a social worker and a psychologist and a speech therapist, and, you know, they're all concentrating on, you know, we're going to put you back together as whole as possible. And we're going to talk to each other about this stuff. And so few stroke patients are able to enjoy that and able to benefit from that. And, you know, I've heard stories since my stroke of, you know, people who are, you know, particularly older and, you know, if they're on Medicare or Medicaid, you know, they're sent home 2 days after the stroke. And it's like, you know, figure it out yourself. You know, here's some resources, here's a pamphlet. And I got basically the opposite approach, and in large part because of my wife's fierce advocacy. So if I had a magic wand, it would really be to reconfigure the system so that kind of care is less expensive than what it is, because there's a reality that our system is broken on a cost basis. But it would also be that, and frankly, that the whole medical profession would operate this way. I told you earlier, I had kind of an anecdote about this because I really felt the pain of it once I'd been out for about a month. So we'd had an incident when I was in the rehab hospital that we thought was AFib, that you know, I was doing one of my PT workouts, and they were worried that I was going into AFib. And so we, you know, they took me back to my room, and we did all the blood pressure and all the vital signs and stuff like that. And the conclusion over the course of the, you know, as we sort of investigated over the rest of the course of my stay there, was that I was not suffering from AFib, but as a precautionary measure, they put me on amnioteron to stabilize that and sort of fend that off. Well, I get out of the hospital, I'm still taking the amnioteron. I follow up with my cardiac surgeon probably a couple days before Christmas, and he's like, you know what, that AFib thing, that was an artifact, that was machine error or user error or whatever. You're clearly not in AFib, so we're going to take you off of this. Okay, so he takes me off of it. Great, one less pill to have to take every day. Then he transitions me to my regular cardiologist going forward, same practice. And I have my first appointment with him in kind of mid-January. And by this time, we went and traveled a little bit over Christmas break. I'm back. I'm working out again a couple of days a week with the F3 guys. I'm feeling good. And the cardiologist looks at it and he's like, you had some AFib. And I'm like, no, it wasn't really AFib. It was just an artifact, whatever. He goes, I'm not going to put you back on the amnioteron, but you shouldn't have been taken off of it. And now I want you to wear this heart monitor for the next 30 days. And I don't want you to work out hard for the next 30 days. And I'm just like, if you two, surgeon and cardiologist, could talk to each other on this, you would realize that this was not an issue. But instead I had to wear this stupid heart monitor and carry a second phone around for another month and basically dial back my workouts and just at the point when, I was starting to feel good again, and I was feeling like I was on the road to recovery. And it was so stupid and so avoidable, and such a symptom of where the system breaks down in these things. And ultimately it's not a huge deal, right? I had to wear a heart monitor for 30 days. I'm fine. I'm not in AFib, shockingly. But it's one more thing that adds cost to the system, and just because people aren't in communication with each other. So that's my rant.
No, it's so true. Those silos still remain. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my magic wand. Is I would love everybody else to have a primary caregiver as determined as my wife was, and frankly, health insurance as good as I had when I had my stroke, that I was able to get into the rehab hospital. So.
And just because I'm a co-host and I could do it, I'm going to add one more layer to your magic wand and say, I would add in that, every stroke survivor was in a community similar like F3 that had that accountability and that, that connection and that support. And that's really the driver. So, hey, it was really, really, interesting to talk through all of this with you. We covered a lot. I think it's been, one of our longer podcasts, David, but a lot of good content. So we're really happy to be able to end on this note. I want you to share your upcoming weekend plans with our audience before we head out.
Oh yeah. So I rowed in college. You may be able to see I've got a couple of rowing posters in the background in my office here, and I actually base my practice on it's called CXN advisory, and the CXN refers to the coxswain in a crew boat, which is the little guy or girl who sits on the front or in the back of the boat and kind of calls cadence for the rowers and gets them in sync and everything like that. And that's a nice metaphor for what I do professionally. But I've started back on the rowing machine after the first of the year, and the World Indoor Rowing Championships are in Boston this weekend. So I'm flying up there tomorrow, and my brother is gonna join me there, and he rowed in college as well, and we're gonna do that. And I'm actually gonna visit F3 recently planted a workout in Boston for the first time. So those guys are going to be working out at Harvard Stadium on Saturday morning. So I'm going to go pay them a visit and share some hopefully inspirational words with them as well, and spread the gospel a little bit more. So I'm excited for that. And Mike, you and I have talked about what aspects of F3 are there that can potentially be ported over in some way to support the stroke survivor community. And I'm more than happy to lend my expertise or my support or whatever is helpful in that regard to both of you as you guys carry that flag forward. So.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
All right, Boston F3 Nation.
David, you and I are going to run a marathon together at some point.
I said now you gave up your nickname, so I do owe you that beer. So we'll have to plan for it.
Yeah. We'll drink a beer somewhere between Hopkinton and Boston.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, on that note, F3 Nation up in Boston, you have the Bhagwan heading your way, so prepare yourselves.
Good luck,
right,
Tim.
Tim.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure,
Thank
Tim.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, guys.